Greetings, everyone. My name is Deb Clark Foster. I'm a senior account executive focused on cybersecurity with the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation, and Trade. It is my absolute privilege to provide you with an update about Ontario's cyber landscape. In the next few minutes, we will look at three key areas. One, an overview of cybersecurity globally. Two, where Ontario is strong. And three, the province's leadership in talent. In terms of a definition, Cisco defines cybersecurity as the practice of protecting systems, networks, and programs from digital attacks. These attacks are usually aimed at accessing, changing, or destroying sensitive information, or extorting money from users, or interrupting normal business processes. Tech Jury research tells us in 2021 that cyber attacks are one of the fastest growing crimes globally. Every 39 seconds, there was a new attack on the web. Globally, 30,000 websites were hacked daily, with financial, healthcare, and retail organizations targeted. Approximately 677,000 records per day were breached, and 64% of companies worldwide experienced at least one form of a cyber attack. Let us now take a look at an overview of cybersecurity globally. Forbes has reported the top 5 cybersecurity trends for 2022, and they are as follows. Number 1, AI-powered cybersecurity. The predictive powers of AI counteract cybercrime by identifying patterns of behavior, with the capacity to handle thousands of events taking place every second. Capgemini reports that 75% of businesses use or are currently testing AI for cybersecurity threats. 2, the growing threat of ransomware. Global ransomware damage costs are predicted to exceed 265 billion US by 2031, which is up significantly from 2019. PwC tells us 61% of tech execs expect ransomware attacks to increase in 2022. 3, the Internet of Vulnerable Things. Suffice to say, the number of devices is expected to reach into the billions in 2022. 4, cybersecurity risk and exposure is quickly becoming a key factor in partnership decisions. Businesses are beginning to assess cyber resilience and exposure in selecting supply chain and third-party partners. By 2025, Gartner predicts 60% of organizations will use cybersecurity risk as a primary determinant in choosing who to conduct business with. And regulation is starting to catch up with risk. Forbes reports that global cybercrime damage is predicted to hit 10.5 trillion US annually by 2025. As we know, the cost of cybercrime is quite simply not sustainable. It is growing at a rate of 15% per year from 2020 to 2025. Regulators are expected to expand penalties and legal obligations by CISOs in order to limit the impact of data theft and losses. Let us now take a look at a global cybersecurity market forecast according to Statista from 2017 to 2023. Statista has been tracking the growth in this market, which is increasing steadily year after year. From 2020 to 2023, the compound annual growth rate is predicted at 10.4%. Statista tells us that by 2023, the global cybersecurity market forecast will be 248 billion US. Global Insights, another source, tells us that by 2024, the market will be valued at over 300 million US. Let us now take a look at cybercrime worldwide according to a number of different sources. IBM and Ponyman Institute report that the average cost of a data breach was 4.24 million US in 2021, which is up significantly from 2020, where it was 3.86 million US. The average time to identify a breach last year was 212 days. The average life cycle of a breach in 2021 was 287 days, and that's captured from identification to containment. And the average breach cost was higher, approximately $1 million US higher, where remote work was a factor. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity tells us the demand for cyber products and services is projected to grow to 334 billion Canadian by the end of next year. Cybersecurity Ventures reports that global cybersecurity spending will exceed 1.75 trillion US from 2021 to 2025, which represents a 15% increase year over year. Cybersecurity Ventures also comments about the cyber insurance market, which is predicted to hit 14.8 billion US by 2025 and 34 billion US by 2031. Ransomware and phishing continue to be the most significant cyber attacks that we see. What's important to note is Palo Alto Networks reports that the average ransom paid in Canada in Q4 of 2021 was just a little more than 458,000 Canadian dollars. That is up from just shy of 150,000 Canadian in Q1 of 2020, according to the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. What we see is in approximately 18 months, a $300,000 increase in the average ransom paid in Canada. With respect to phishing, Tuco Managed IT Services conducted a test in late 2020, and it's important to note their results. Almost 7 out of 10 Canadians failed to pass a phishing test because they were unable to spot fake emails. Section 2. Let's now take a look at Ontario's strength in cybersecurity. In Canada, according to Information and Communications Technology Council, there will be more than 100,000 jobs forecasted in cybersecurity by 2023 in Canada. Executives in this country still continue to view cyber threats as one of the top risks to their business. 3 of those reasons include the implementation of the Personal Information Protection and Electronics Document Act, known as PIPEDA, which was enacted into law in November of 2018. Essentially, any company anywhere in the world, and that includes Canadian companies who are doing business with a Canadian individual, an organization, a business, or a government, should data be breached, these clients must be informed. Failure to do so results in financial penalties. 2, most Canadians would rethink doing business with any company that faced a breach. And 3, unfortunately, this data still holds true. 60% of all businesses fail within 6 months of a cyber breach. Let us now take a look at some of the damages. The average cost of a data breach in Canada, and this is according to IBM Security, is 6.75 million Canadian in 2021. That is up from 6.35 million Canadian in 2022 and is higher than the global average of 5.34 million Canadian. One of the reasons, according to IBM Security, for this increase is based on the number of Canadians who have worked remotely during the global pandemic, often without the benefit of a VPN or firewalls, and often using personal devices. There have been a number of major security breaches in Canada from 2019 to present, but I think it's important to talk just a moment about Desjardins, who is the first company to settle a large class action lawsuit. So in June of 2019, approximately 9.7 million Canadians had their data breached. And in December of 2021, the company settled a $201 million class action lawsuit, the first in Canada. In terms of Ontario's cybersecurity sector, I'm very pleased to tell you that known to myself is approximately 300 cybersecurity companies across the province. They tend to concentrate in three major hubs, being the Greater Toronto Area, where there is 135 known cybersecurity companies, 86 companies in Ottawa Region, 52 in Waterloo Region. All of these hubs have a strength in cybersecurity education at both the university and college levels. But it's also important to note that we are seeing cybersecurity companies locate in all regions across the province, to the north, to the southwest, and to the east. In terms of a few of the companies that you may be familiar with in these clusters, in the Greater Toronto Area, we see companies like SecureKey, like Identos, like Herchevik Group, like BioConnect. In Ottawa Region, we see Exahive, we see Two Keys, we see SciDef. In Waterloo Region, we see Arctic Wolf, we see Evolution Q, we see Toria. What's important to note about these clusters is there are some slight differences. The Greater Toronto Area has a higher presence of foreign multinationals, such as IBM, Cisco. Ottawa Region also has multinationals like Nokia and Trend Micro, but they also have a number of companies who do business with the Government of Canada, often with a focus in defense. And Waterloo Region has a very strong culture of startups. We see companies like Magnet Forensics, Icera, eCentire, that all started as startups in Waterloo Region. In terms of what these 302 companies actually do, I have an applications breakdown by companies to demonstrate the strengths of cybersecurity in Ontario. Approximately 37% of all companies are involved in technology, and that includes those who are involved in quantum. Approximately 10% are involved in vulnerability management, as we often refer to as pen testing. Approximately 21% are involved in monitoring and incident response. This is where we see our MSSPs and our SOCs. Interestingly, though, we see risk assessments at approximately 9%. About a year ago, this was less than 2% of the market. So in the past 12 months, we've seen a significant increase in the number of companies focused on risk assessments. And I'd also like to point out cybersecurity strategy, which includes governance and compliance and consulting, but it also includes education. About 3 years ago, this represented about 3% of the market. 2 years ago, about 13% of the market. Today, it represents 23% of the market, with more than 60 companies performing education in cybersecurity. This is important, as we know, because human error represents 95% of so many of the cybersecurity breaches that we see. It's also important for those companies who are interested in implementing a cybersecurity insurance strategy. And it's also important to help non-IT professionals learn the basics of how to keep data safe. In terms of the size of companies that Ontario's sector deals with, it's important to note some interesting changes. About 6 months ago, so in June of 2021, about 31% of the market focused at the enterprise level. Fast forward to the end of January, and it's about 42% of the market is now focused at the enterprise level. When I speak with the sector, I'm provided with rationale such as enterprise seems to have the budget and are increasingly concerned about the cost and the damages associated with cybersecurity breaches. So, looking at those same 302 companies, who are their key customer verticals? It's important to note this chart just demonstrates a trend. You know, many companies deal with companies across all verticals, but I think the trending suggests that we see governments, healthcare, and financial services as being a primary focus for Ontario's cybersecurity sector. What it also does is demonstrate opportunities for growth in the future when we look at areas such as data center, such as contact centers, such as agriculture. Now, we're into section 3. I'd like to focus on leadership and talent. It's important to note Ontario's cybersecurity talent pipeline is strong. We have more than 45 post-secondary institutions in the province providing curriculum in cybersecurity. There's at least 50 programs that are offered and more than 700 courses that I am aware of in cybersecurity. In terms of the ecosystem itself, I'd like to just point out a few alternatives with respect to academia. The University of Waterloo has established the Cybersecurity and Privacy Institute. Ryerson University, through its Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst, is doing an incredible role with an accelerator, the first of its kind in Canada, focused on cybersecurity, as well as in advisory support. And I'd also like to point out the University of Windsor Shield Automotive Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, which is very much focused on automotive and automobility cybersecurity specialization. There's one other area I'd like to point out, a non-traditional post-secondary route, and that is Coding for Veterans, which provides up to 800 hours over 2 years online for those retired military veterans who are looking for a second career. These individuals graduate with CISSP certification, which is somewhat different than our colleges and universities. In terms of the network, there are many, but if I may, I'd like to point out just a few. First of all, INSECM is doing a brilliant job as being Canada's first national cybersecurity association. So kudos to Mark and his team. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, the Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange, CTA, Cybersecure Canada, the Women's Cybersecure Society, and of course, Global Affairs are all helping to advance Ontario's cybersecurity ecosystem. And I'd also like to point out some accelerators, many of whom you're familiar with: Communitech, Mars, Velocity, and DMZ. In terms of salaries, I am often asked how our salaries compare not only to other cities, but to other cities around the world. The average cybersecurity analyst salary in Canada, according to PayScale for 2021, is approximately $66,000 Canadian. It's about 3% less in Toronto, about 19% higher in Ottawa, about 11% less in Mississauga, and about 12% less in Cambridge. What's important to note is how these salaries compare to the United States. So, in terms of the conversion between US to Canadian dollars, and this is per April 4th, 2022, that $66,000 analyst salary here in Canada, you will see in Boston, you would need to pay just roughly 110,000 Canadian. In New York, roughly 110,000 Canadian. In San Antonio, Texas, approximately 90,000 Canadian. And in San Francisco, approximately 112,000 Canadian. In Canada, we also have the distinct advantage of an additional 30% cost savings because of our healthcare system. Let's take a look at that same salary as it compares to Europe and the UK. That same salary in Germany is valued at approximately 74,000 Canadian, and that again is using conversion on April 4th, 2022. In France, that same salary equates to just under 57,000 Canadian. In London, approximately 58,000 Canadian. In Edinburgh, Scotland, approximately 52,000 Canadian. What's interesting to note about the UK is something that we don't see represented in the other bands, and that's that component of profit sharing. We see profit sharing in London, we see profit sharing in Edinburgh, which suggests to us those markets have a very strong startup base. So similarly, we wanted to compare the cybersecurity engineering salary, according once again to PayScale for 2021. That salary in Canada is about 86,000. It's about 1% less in Toronto and about 16% higher in Ottawa. If we take a look at that same salary compared to those same cities in the US, Boston, that same salary, you would need to pay about 134,000 Canadian. You would need to pay about 101,000 in New York, about 102,000 in San Antonio, Texas, and about 166,000 in Silicon Valley. Again, I'd like to point out there's an additional 30% cost savings for Canadian businesses due to our healthcare system. Let's take a look at that cybersecurity engineering salary in Europe and the UK. Using pay scale information, we were able to pull information about Germany. So it equates to just shy of 84,000 Canadian and approximately 76,000 in France. And if we look at London, it's approximately 94,000 Canadian. Again, I will point out the profit sharing component that we see in London that we don't see demonstrated by pay scale in other markets. So I will end on the next couple of slides just with a few highlights on some of the financial opportunities for companies here in Ontario as you grow your business. Ontario has a number of different funds, including the Eastern Ontario Development Fund, the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund, which focus on Eastern Ontario and Southwestern Ontario, and they help companies grow if you're committed to creating 5 new jobs over 4 years. Essentially, the funding contribution is up to 15% of total eligible expenditures to a maximum of $5 million, and it's in the form of a loan. The Northern Ontario Heritage Fund is usually on a case-by-case basis, and it is focused on growth on the emerging sectors identified in the growth plan for Northern Ontario, and certainly the technology sector is one of those growth sectors. I will also highlight that there are cooperative education tax credits for businesses that hire students. There is the Canada-Ontario Job Grant Program to help with training, and the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program for those of you who are interested in nominating foreign workers for permanent residence. Federally, the Government of Canada also has programs in place. They have the Strategic Innovation Fund, which really is focused on some of the larger projects that represent more than a $10 million requested contribution. The Business Scale-Up and Productivity Program and the Jobs and Growth Fund are primarily in the form of a loan, and they help businesses over a course of 5 years to grow their business. There is also scientific research and experimental program, which we know as SHRED. That is a tax incentive to encourage Canadian businesses to conduct R&D in Canada. I would like to thank you for your time and attention. By all means, feel free to reach out to me at any point. I welcome your thoughts. I welcome your ideas. I welcome your questions and your comments. On that note, I would like to thank Mark and his team at INSECM for organizing CIS 2022. Thank you.